Welcome to our webinar, Outage to Opportunity, Learning from the CrowdStrike Outage, presented by Citrin Cooperman. Our agenda for today is to introduce our panel of talented speakers, provide a brief overview of what CrowdStrike did and its impacts on business, what you can do to help alleviate future incidents, CrowdStrike or otherwise, and solutions which get you to the next level in your IT journey. We hope by attending, you walk away with actionable steps or at least probing questions for you and your organization's IT posture. I'd like to introduce our panel of experienced individuals. Today we have Zach, leading Citrin Cooperman's Microsoft Digital Services team, Kevin, leader of the cybersecurity practice within the technology, risk advisory, and cybersecurity practice, myself, Chris, leading Microsoft 365 and Azure, and Ian, one of our many talented staff members with hands on the keyboard experience implementing Microsoft's related services. Let's get started with Zach.
Thank you, Chris, and I want to welcome everyone. Thanks for taking time to join us today. We are diving into the critical topic of cybersecurity and incident response, coming right on the heels of the recent CrowdStrike incident. And as Chris mentioned, your presenters today are partners, directors, and consultants in Citrin Cooperman's digital services practice. We strive to stay at the forefront of cybersecurity and incident response to help ensure that our clients are well protected against not only existing threats, but of course, evolving and zero-day threats. And a little bit more about our expertise. We are technology risk and cybersecurity specialists covering a number of different areas. For example, IT risk and cybersecurity maturity assessments, which really means that we're adept at identifying and mitigating risks before they become more significant issues. We also understand the importance of threat and vulnerability management and taking a proactive approach through penetration testing and vulnerability scanning to identify potential threats and address them to minimize the risk of breach in the first place. And if for better or worse, we know we all need to be prepared for incidents. And I know that you've probably heard it's not if, but when your organization will become a target. So in the event of a security incident, our team is ready to respond quickly and effectively to minimize damage, ensure quick recovery, and generally, equally important to provide the forensic analysis and evidence to help you understand the scope of an incident. We also know that compliance and regulatory frameworks are a significant component and honestly a real challenge to manage when it comes to cybersecurity and IT risk. So our team can help navigate complex compliance requirements across areas like SOC Type 1 and Type 2, NIST, HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley, PCI, and other frameworks to provide guidance, planning, and help to implement controls to meet those industry standards and regulations. So we do all of this with a team of certified industry experts, including certified ethical hackers and information security managers, qualified security assessors, as well as Microsoft Security Administrator Associates and Microsoft Security Operations Analysts. So it's a well-rounded group. Citrin is a top Microsoft partner. We're recognized for a couple of different areas, including business applications and modern work, really just demonstrating the ability to deliver successful outcomes for all of our clients and customers on the Microsoft cloud. And that's in addition to the more platform agnostic IT risk and cybersecurity expertise. And hands on the keyboard, as Chris mentioned, we know a lot about that in terms of endpoint protection, endpoint management, email and identity security, as well as cloud migration. The team has deployed many seats of Microsoft Defender products and other identity data and endpoint protection solutions. IT risk and cybersecurity is really a holistic approach. Right? We embrace the idea of a wheel with our customers at the center and the various stages of IT risk and cybersecurity planning, implementation, ongoing management and enhancement running continuously around the outside. And lastly, we're not going to touch on it today, but the digital services practice also spans expertise across ERP and financial applications, CRM, as well as integration services. for all key IT business application areas. So enough about us. I'm excited to hand it over to Ian to jump into exactly what happened with the recent CrowdStrike incident.
Thanks, Zach. I appreciate it. Let's talk about some of the technicals. So on Friday, July 19th, IT administrators across the world were alerted to widespread crashes affecting Microsoft Windows servers and workstations. The root cause was identified as a routine update pushed from the CrowdStrike Cybersecurity platform. While such updates are standard practice to ensure robust security against novel threats, this particular update, known as Channel File 291, inadvertently progressed from testing to production, resulting in system failures. You might wonder how a single file update can cause such a widespread outage. Security software like CrowdStrike operates within the kernel of a computer, a critical area that provides system-wide visibility and the ability to detect threats early in the boot process, even before a user logs in. Microsoft permits the most trusted packages to run in this space, which they even have a certification process for. When the operating system detects that there's an issue with one of these kernel drivers, it halts the system to prevent potential further damage, resulting in the blue screen. This safeguard is designed to protect the integrity of the system. Following the identification of the issue caused by the CrowdStrike update, the focus now shifts to resolution. Initially, Microsoft and CrowdStrike recommended rebooting computers while connected to a fast network rather than Wi-Fi. Their rationale was that since CrowdStrike services initiate early in the boot process, like I had previously mentioned, and the computer stays online long enough, it's possible they would communicate with CrowdStrike's cloud servers to quarantine channel file 291. However, this approach yielded limited success. Consequently, many administrators opted to manually boot systems into a recovery console to remove the file by command line. After this was completed, it allowed the operating systems to boot normally. While this process is generally straightforward for an IT admin, it required physical access to the servers and workstations. Now, for remote users, it was even more involved, guiding them through the remediation process over the phone or having them bring their devices back to the office. Some admins took to social media and crowdsourced how they can automate as much of this process as possible. As we learned more about the issue and its remediation, more efficient resolutions started coming to light. As of yesterday, CrowdStrike is reporting that approximately 99% of Windows sensors are back online. Now, while this sounds positive, it also means that even after 2.5 weeks, there's still work to be done. By the way, Microsoft is constantly increasing security defaults, including dozens of new security features enabled by default in Windows 11 to help prevent future occurrences of this problem if you continue to use third-party products. Yes, Microsoft is working with the anti-malware ecosystem to take advantage of these integrated features and modernize third-party vendors' approach, like CrowdStrike, helping to support and even increase security along with reliability. The impact of the incident was felt worldwide. Manually remediating all managed servers and workstations is a time-consuming process that placed significant strain on IT departments who worked around the clock. Many teams had to call upon other business units with technical expertise for assistance. This incident affected millions of Windows devices and resulted in billions of dollars in losses. Some notable companies impacted include airlines such as Delta, banks like Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo. Various US government departments were also affected, and hospitals had to postpone non-urgent surgeries and visits. Even local businesses to me, such as CVS, were unable to process retail point-of-sale payments. We are also now hearing about some high-profile potential litigation involving Delta Airlines, CrowdStrike, and Microsoft, with considerable finger-pointing among the parties involved. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Kevin, who will discuss with you how you can best prepare yourself and be successful with incidents of this magnitude.
Thank you, Ian. As we've learned from the information presented thus far, it's clear that there was an extraordinary amount of pain inflicted by the CrowdStrike outage. And while it's difficult to imagine any benefit coming from what has occurred, there's a lesson that I learned long ago that may help generate some positivity from this catastrophic event, and that's never let a crisis go to waste. And what I mean by that is that as difficult as it may have been for your organization, We can use some of the lessons from what we experienced to help fortify our organization so that we can recover more quickly from future challenges such as outages or cyber attacks, and perhaps even avoid them altogether. And while the CrowdStrike situation was due to an outage and not a cyber attack, there are enough similarities between the two incidents that certain actions would help us navigate either scenario if, or as Zach mentioned earlier, more likely when they happen again in the future. Let's cover a few best practices that will be beneficial to you regardless of which disastrous scenario should strike your organization. First up, cybercriminals often look to take advantage of chaos, especially an outage of the size and magnitude of what happened with CrowdStrike. Their tactics often include posting malware, masquerading as a miraculous support patch that will ostensibly resolve the outage and get your systems back online. In the desperation of resuming operations as quickly as possible, haste becomes a contributing factor to how companies make a bad situation exponentially worse when they rush to deploy an update that winds up spawning sophisticated strains of ransomware. The risk of this type of catastrophic development is compounded by criminals spinning up authentic-looking websites claiming to have the solution to the crisis. For example, immediately following the CrowdStrike outage, surreptitious domains were unleashed by threat actors, including CrowdStrikeOutage.com and CrowdStrike-BSOD.com, just to name a few. And this is why it's so imperative to seek patches from trusted websites and to contact support through known communication channels, as deviating from these paths could lead you directly into a cybercriminal's trap. Within hours of these types of crises, I can say with near absolute certainty that cybercriminals will then unleash an onslaught of social engineering attacks in an attempt to ensnare you into compromising sensitive information, such as administrator credentials. So be sure to consider any unexpected outreach with a healthy dose of skepticism, especially if a communication did not originate from that trusted channel. Training, augmented by regular social engineering simulations, will help improve your employees' ability to detect and avoid these types of attacks, transforming your employees into a virtual human firewall. And whether it's an outage or a cyber attack, it's critically important to have an established incident response plan in place to help expedite the recovery from any unexpected scenario. When our team at Citrin Cooperman evaluates an incident response plan, the number one issue we encounter is that it is developed and tested exclusively by members of IT. Since a major incident or cyber attack will impact all facets of a company's operations, it's vital that all divisions within your company are involved in the authoring and testing of your plan. For example, does IT know how or when to communicate an outage to the press or to your customers? And do they have the authority to execute contingency planning in the event of an outage? To make the response as efficient as possible, it's key that management from across the company provide their input and understand their responsibilities so that the recovery is both methodical and cohesive, and that the number of surprises are minimized, including how long it's estimated until operations can be restored. One of the last things a company needs is ownership finding out that the recovery time objectives far exceed their expectations. And while having a detailed plan is a tremendous asset, it is only half the battle, as that plan now needs to be updated and tested on a regular basis so that everyone is familiar with their roles and any changes to the environment or personnel is reflected in the plan. And if you don't have the ability to complete a full test of the plan, consider a tabletop test so that everyone can walk through the key elements of how to respond to an incident. One additional proactive step that can be taken is to complete a review of your vendors. By establishing a risk management process to evaluate the security and incident response readiness of your vendors, you will be able to better identify which third parties can significantly impact your company's operations. Requesting and evaluating SLAs and SOC reports, combined with assessing their cybersecurity protocols on a periodic basis, will allow you to determine levels of vendor risk and how best to establish contingency plans to compensate for any potential third-party outages. Well, these are just some of the few overlapping steps that can be taken to prepare yourself for both outages as well as attacks. I would be remiss if I didn't quickly cover a few additional best practices that are more closely related to a cybersecurity incident. For example, conducting cyber assessments to gauge the maturity and strength of your security efforts, implementing a regular cadence for patching software and hardware, having robust cyber insurance and IT resources in place to help with the recovery process, establishing strong endpoint protection and security monitoring solutions, and giving consideration to establishing a zero trust security model that requires all users, whether they are inside or outside of your organization's network, to be authenticated, authorized, and continuously validated before they can gain access to your applications or data. If you have not yet considered zero trust, or if you want to learn more about how it can benefit your organization, I strongly encourage you to contact Citrin Cooperman to discuss how adopting this approach will significantly strengthen your security. I'd now like to hand the baton over to Chris so that he can share his expertise on how best to weather the next time a storm arrives.
That's right. Thank you, Kevin. To follow up on what you just stated, right? We understand that everyone is tied to support agreements and contracts for their existing products and vendors, right? A good approach to address your stack when you're reviewing things is to tie reviews to budgeting seasons. Identify where you're getting the most value out of your products and where you may have shortcomings. Layers are a must, so make sure that you have them. Documentation is also key, especially during incidents or outages, as you have a run book to follow during a chaotic time, again, as Kevin has mentioned. Practice the documented drills with the business if possible to get buy-in from all parties, because security is everybody's responsibility. Tie the documentation reviews and practice drills to slower times of the year to help with buy-in, because it's key to be proactive and not reactive. During the review of your stack, determine where you can do updates in rings if possible. A ring approach can be applied to Windows updates, antivirus updates, which CrowdStrike did not do, software deployments, IT policies using endpoint management, a variety of items. If you still have legacy software that could be affected, think about test environments or modernization, as legacy software is its own budget, security, and productivity drain. If this all sounds time-consuming and expensive, think about how time-consuming and expensive the CrowdStrike outage was for everyone that was affected and for all of the companies that worked with other companies that were affected. Remember, nobody wants to fail, but if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. If you haven't considered Microsoft during your technology review or aren't sure what capabilities you already have with your existing Microsoft investments, yes, we know their licensing can be confusing. Take the time to consider what they can offer you. Microsoft is a technology superpower, seriously. Defender for Endpoint is an option to replace CrowdStrike. It's already on all of your Windows devices. Defender for Office 365 and Entra, great email and identity solutions. Endpoint management, you must manage endpoints through Intune, especially if you do not have a good grip on the upcoming end of support for Windows 10 next year. As Kevin had mentioned as well, Microsoft has zero trust in mind, so we hope you do too. Using multiple vendors can leave gaps in your coverage and complicate your operations. We see this often, especially with smaller IT departments who struggle to keep the lights on, let alone push technology forward for their organization. Simplify and strengthen your security with streamlined, multi-layered protection with Microsoft. This approach can also save you money and reduce invoicing. You must think about Microsoft during your reviews. Microsoft is a recognized leader in cybersecurity, and they can help you. Here are several industry accolades. Gartner, Forrester. Microsoft is a leader across platforms. This spans extended detection and response, access management, endpoint, email, identity protection, zero trust again. It's a long list of well-praised, natively connected products. Here are a couple examples highlighting Microsoft and Gartner and Forrester. As you can see, CrowdStrike is a great tool, but don't think for a minute that Microsoft is not powerful in this space, and many more. If you're using one of these other vendors, think twice about what they are providing for the associated costs. Take a moment to reflect on if their third-party tool is fully integrated with your other Microsoft investments. Example, does your antivirus have the ability to block access to company data hosted in the cloud or prevent the user from sending malicious emails if it detects an endpoint event? Microsoft's single pane of glass allows you to do so that one endpoint event does not lead to further damage and spread. Consolidated tools minimize impact dramatically. Is your subscription up for renewal? Is your existing subscription on this list at all? Do you not have one to begin with? Let's talk. Knowing what you know about the CrowdStrike outage and the information provided today, what will you do? What are your next steps? There is the obvious choice of nothing, right? As is, stay the course. Many of you will have to speak with your executive team thinking you are prepared. Or do you want to have some outside consultation and speak with Citrin Cooperman to know that you are prepared? As a joke, right, you could switch to Mac OS because Apple Intelligence is in beta, but in all seriousness, our job is to inform clients both reactively and proactively and help them move through their technology journey. It is extremely difficult for IT teams to manage the day-to-day and stay up to date on all there is out there vying for their attention, especially if they're dealing with CrowdStrike outages or other cybersecurity incidents. Multiple vendors and multiple technologies multiply the outcomes to the point where your head spins. Let Citrin Cooperman see you through your unanswered or even unknown questions across cybersecurity and know what the power of Microsoft can do for you. We'd like to open up the floor to some questions right now. I think, Ian, you were monitoring those, wanted to talk through some of that.
Yeah, we had a few come in. I'm just trying to filter some of these. Here's one. As a smaller organization with limited resources, how is it possible to implement some of the best practices shared during the webinar?
That's a good question. And we get this all the time. Again, right, there's varying size teams across there. You have to think about small IT teams, 1 to 2 people, ratios of IT people to the size of the organization. I think that regardless of where you're coming from that standpoint, small, medium, large, right, we recommend using the power of Microsoft to consolidate disparate tools, right, because of the efficiencies gained and the less knowledge you need to know how to implement all of the tools effectively, right? When you're consolidating on Microsoft, this helps any size team improve their efficiency with tools that are natively connected and not bolted together, right? If they are at all, which in many cases they are not put together well, either because of a time constraint, a resource constraint, or a lack of knowledge, right? So again, having that single pane of glass and being able to see incidents all the way through and stopping as proactively as possible with the layers that we were talking about, right? That's one of the best practices I would say to think about. And definitely do this during your review of your technology stack. If they aren't integrated today, if it's not even possible, right? Rethink about what you can do with your existing Microsoft investments or expand upon those. Good question.
Yeah, and I would also add that the Microsoft Business Premium licensing bundle is one of the best kind of bang for your buck values in
Absolutely.
In the space that is going to cover all of your productivity and collaboration needs with Microsoft 365, in addition to most or all of the different cybersecurity platforms and services that we called out. It is a massive cost savings over even buying them separately on the Microsoft enterprise level. So if you're a small business under 300 users or 300 seats, that business premium bundle is available to you. So there's a financial benefit. And then on the kind of labor and effort side, Chris has mentioned the fact that these tools are natively integrated out of the box, and there are baseline security configurations that can be turned on with a few clicks if you're not ready to really dive deep, so that you have the comfort of knowing that you're secured across email protection, endpoint protection, data protection, etc.
Yeah,
Many
I agree
people
with
fall
that.
into that spot where you're on Microsoft Business Basic or Microsoft Business Standard, right? You may have third-party tools, which then Microsoft can help with a cost savings by going to Business Premium. You may not have the third-party tools, in which case you're missing layers of protection to help with these events. Sorry to cut you off, Ian.
That's okay. I just wanted to say that there is tremendous value in that business premium. Let's see. Another question that came in is, what is the top threat our business should be aware of?
A lot out there. Definitely a lot out there. One threat, as we mentioned during this presentation, is, not being prepared, right? There's the incident management that needs to happen, the response, being proactive, right? Having these things in place. This includes user education, right? With cybersecurity training. It's an essential layer, right? Because end users do have a tendency to click on items that may be malicious in nature before even CrowdStrike could comprehend, right, that attacks are happening. So you have to have those multiple layers in place, right, to help protect against that, but proactively educating users so that they understand the importance of valid emails, what a valid email looks like, what a phishing email looks like, things to look out for, tips and tricks. And it's ongoing. It's not a one and done kind of thing. It's a continual education and training kind of opportunity.
Yeah, Chris, if I can piggyback on that, I think you're absolutely right. I honestly feel that as security technology continues to improve by leaps and bounds, cyber criminals are constantly looking for more effective means of profiting from their victims. So, instead of battling their way through intrusion detection systems, firewalls, XDR solutions, these criminals are going to continue focusing on the weakest link in the security chain, namely us. So social engineering attacks, whether they're delivered via email, text messages, phone calls, or even QR codes, whatever the mechanism may be, they're often the weapon of choice that I'm seeing out in the real world, for these cyber criminals, especially since these threat actors are now able to leverage the power of artificial intelligence to supercharge their efforts. So end users, to your point, I couldn't agree more, must be educated and must remain vigilant against these attacks, as we're all really just one errant keystroke or mouse click away from becoming their next victim.
Here's
Definitely.
another. What metrics or KPIs should we track to measure the effectiveness of our cybersecurity initiatives?
Metrics are always important. If you can measure it, you can improve upon that, right? This applies to many areas of IT and, of course, throughout the business. One of those ways that Microsoft can help you, right, is within their built-in Microsoft Secure Score, right? This is a compilation of items that Microsoft has waiting for you to review, right? Where you're given a number based on where you stand in all of these various metrics that they have put together, right? And it gives you a score, and you can look at that score and see remediation items to improve your score. Easy to follow, right? For technically minded people to start implementing actionable insights. And again, business ready reports, right? That you can use to showcase where you are in your journey and what needs to happen, right? A very obvious one that might be on the list if you're not doing it already is to implement conditional access policies using Microsoft Entra Premium. If you don't have those in place enforcing MFA, you're going to have a lower score, right? If you take the steps to implement that, then your score is going to improve. And that is the secure score overall is just a very easy and effective way to have a metric to go off of so that you can measure and improve.
Yeah, I will add back to the conversation around the kind of human elements of cybersecurity training, whichever tooling your organization might be using, if it's KnowBe4, Defender for Office 365. Not only are you able to deploy kind of the simulated attacks and then the follow-up training to users, but you can also report on what we call the repeat offenders who have been caught up in the attack simulations once, had training assigned and completed, and then 6 months later get caught up in the next attack simulation. So it is critical to understand what areas of the business or which users within the business might need a bit of a more white glove approach. It's not something that should shy away from. It's something that you should embrace to ensure that your most productive employees and folks in the organization really understand and have the appropriate training that they need not to be caught up in social engineering attacks and other kinds of email-based activities from threat actors.
They really are getting extremely smart, legitimate, third-party file storage solutions that the business uses, sharing links that are valid, right? Not malicious in nature to begin with. And then the user keeps clicking deeper and deeper down, and eventually they give up their username and password, right? So it happens every day.
Yeah, and in the past, English was not typically the first language of a lot of these attackers, but now through AI, they're able to write scripts that make it much more, sound much more natural and authentic, and combined with deep fake technology, which is on the rise here, these attacks are becoming more and more sophisticated and dangerous, no doubt.
Okay, and our final one came in more in the form of a statement rather than a question, but as Microsoft consultants and partner, I hear this a lot, so I figured it is very important to bring this one up too. So someone said, I'm afraid of having all my eggs in one basket. This would happen if I went all in on Microsoft.
We definitely get that one a lot, for sure, right? No one's invincible out there. Microsoft, Google, everyone has their faults, right? But Microsoft is a global leader, and regardless, as Kevin had mentioned before, right, and I had mentioned, and all of us have mentioned, you have to have layers in place. And two of those key layers, right, are business continuity and disaster recovery, right? Key layers. These events will happen, whether it's a CrowdStrike outage that affected, the entire planet, or cybersecurity threats. You have to know what to do when these events happen. And so they're key layers. Now, if Microsoft was down in its entirety across all of its services, right, there's probably a larger world event happening. Microsoft has data centers all over the world with redundancy up the wazoo, things that businesses themselves could never accomplish on their own easily without being extremely costly, right? With all sorts of layers of redundancy. That's just very difficult for a personal business to do, right? But Microsoft has this working to their benefit. And again, it's interconnected throughout the entire globe. So I would say, yes, you can have concerns about having all of your eggs in one basket, but you are planning for the tiniest moment, right? Instead of thinking about what can you do to improve the 99.99999% of the time that Microsoft is up and operational. And again, right, they don't have complete outages across their entire universe. It's just, unlikely to happen. But planning for any kind of activity, even if it's the 0.001, right, that Microsoft might have a single service outage, is those things that you have to really work on. Because again, it could be another CrowdStrike, it could be a cybersecurity incident. Maybe OneDrive for Business has a incremental impairment, right? All communicated through the Microsoft Admin Center. So think about that. Definitely think about that.
Yeah, it's an important point, to stress that having a DR plan, right, is really where you need to be. Even if it is kind of this all eggs in one basket, it's far better to have that than to not have a plan at all. But within all these layers, something to consider is a multi-cloud solution for something like DR. If you are already working out of Azure for your production infrastructure, your production platform services, certainly consider DR in a different cloud, whether that's AWS or Google Compute Cloud, or vice versa, right? If you have an AWS footprint, consider a DR solution maybe in AWS and in Azure to give you a little bit more variety in a multi-cloud setup. But I do tend to agree with Chris's point that everything is very interconnected. We know that when AWS has issues, Netflix and other streaming services and point of sale and a lot of big names are impacted. And the CrowdStrike incident is really no different from that. So, I think for most of us, it's checking the boxes off to prepare and deploying the services that kind of reduce the complexity, reduce the effort and labor, and certainly provide the most value from a financial perspective. Once you have that in place, then start to think about multi-cloud and adding some of those additional layers in.
Absolutely, it's a journey, and in technology there is no finish line, right? It keeps evolving and changing, whether it's the threat actors getting more smart, right, on how they're using social engineering and reaching your end users, or just technology changes in general. AI for productive usage, new, right, fresh, people are learning to adopt and adapt. You have to think about that as well, right? Having policies and procedures and tested plans so that your business can operate effectively regardless of what's coming at you. All right, well, if that is the end of the questions, we can conclude our webinar today. We want to really thank you all for joining us and hearing a little bit about what CrowdStrike, the event, what it did to many businesses around the world, what you can do about it, and how Citrin Cooperman can help. So again, thank you.